Yeah, so this is the default application, right? It's a very trivial application. It just has a little image that spins. It's using CSS, right, to make it interpolate various rotational transformations, right? So you can see that it's rotating. It has links so that you can learn more about React, right? And it's giving you a hint that if you edit the app.tsx file, right, you can replace this content with your own content. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to replace this boilerplate out of the box content with our own, right? We're going to be building all sorts of lab exercises, to learn various skills. And also we're going to be building our own web application, so, from scratch, so that you can get a feel for what the development process looks like, right, from a user interface point of view, as well as from the server and database point of view. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so we created the application, we ran it. So npm start, we saw the content. So let's open it up with our favorite IDE. So I'm going to be using VS Code, right? But you're welcome to use other IDEs. I found VS Code to be very lightweight, very fast, easy to use. It doesn't take up that much resources, right? And it fully supports all the development for user interfaces. So let me open up. Let me open up code. Let me bring it over. Here it is. And so I'm going to open up that directory that we just created. So we say open folder. And it's for summer, and I believe it's this one. We'll say open, and there it is. So this is the content that I was showing you earlier in the terminal, right? And so this is the full-blown content, right? We already talked about node_modules. So this is the list of all the libraries, right, that are needed for running our web application. So you definitely need that directory. Now, one thing to say is that directory should never make it into your repository, your source repository in GitHub or anywhere else, right? So that's why you have here you have already a repository already defined. Notice that there's a gitignore file, a .gitignore file, and notice that in that file we have the directory node_modules, right, declared in there. Right, because we never want to have that directory in source code. So make sure that you always have a gitignore, right, that contains that directory in your gitignore. So make sure that this never goes into your repository and you push this, into a source for company, because this is not source, right? These are just compiled classes, compiled objects, right? We have the public directory, which is, I mentioned earlier, this is what servers use to host the content that they're going to serve out, for browsers when they come in. And what you see here, right, in the this content right here is indeed being served, right? View toolbar full. Let's see. Yeah, you can see here, right? This is the. So what you see here, right, on these user interface with links and text and images, that's actually a web application, right? That is being hosted by a server that is running on my local host, meaning on my machine, also at 127.0.0.1, right? That is the IP address of the local machine. It's a standard IP address that always refers to the local machine. So that server is listening at port 3000. Right, port 3000. That's a very typical, popular port number, right, for servers to listen at for Node.js developers, right? Just like if you're a Java developer, a very common port number for Java developers is 8080 or 8000, right? So, but for Node.js, ports 3000, port 4000, those are very popular ports for Node.js developers. And what we're seeing here So this here maps to this directory, this this public directory. So you're seeing here actually this file, index.html. See that? And that's what we're seeing, right? So the browser is going out. You can see, you can open up the inspector. So this inspector is a tool. This is the web development tool that can see, that lets you see behind the scenes, right? How this is built. And you can see in the network, right? If we refresh, that the browser made an HTTP URL request to the server that is running at this IP address, and that port number requested that file. See that? And the server responded. We can see the response. It responded with this content, right? And this content is HTML, right? And the browser parses this HTML and it creates a in-memory representation of this content, right? It creates so this is plain text, right? And it creates an in-memory representation, and you can see that it parses this and it creates almost something identical to it, right? And here it is. So this is a memory data structure, right, that represents the texts, right, that came back from the server, right? Which looks almost identical, but not quite. This is a data structure. It has a hierarchy. It has a root, right? It's like an inverted tree. It has a root, right? It's written in an XML like language or text, right? That declares a hierarchy. There's a root, and then the body contains more elements, and those contain more elements, right? So it creates this hierarchy. The root is the HTML node or element, which has two pieces. It has a head and it has a body. The body is the main content that you see on the screen. The head contains meta information of who the author is, when was this created, right? Things like that, any dependencies, right? But then the main content, what you see on screen, is contained in the body, right? And if you open it up, right, you'll see that there's some other stuff here, no script. So this file, right, well, actually this file is right here, right, is this file, index.html, right? Because that is indeed what the browser is asking for, right? That particular file, and the server gives it. This is the file. There it is. This is just plain text, right? There's nothing magical about this, right? The browser parses this, all these pointy brackets and all these tags, and this tells the browser how to lay out the content, right? How to render it, in what font, right? With a centered, or at the top or the left or the bottom, or as a table, as a list, as a heading. How is it that you want to render each piece of content? But right now the content says that it's empty, right? Here the main body contains this tag saying that if you don't have JavaScript, the browser is going to complain and say, sorry, you don't have JavaScript on, I can't do anything. And then you have this div, right, with a unique identifier of root. See that? And notice that there's nothing inside, right? It's empty, right? So there is no content in there other than that no script, which is, I do have no JavaScript turned on, so I'm not going to see that content. But then this divisor, right, or this division is where the main content would go, right? But there's nothing in it. So the question is, well, what does all this content come from, right? And notice that indeed, this is what the server is responding. Notice that there's nothing in the root. Right? It's empty. So where is this content coming from? Notice that what the browser actually renders is here. This is the interpretation of what came from the server, right? And you'll notice you have the same div, right, with the ID of root, but here the content is in there. You have a whole bunch of other divs. You have a header. You have an image which is rotating, right? You have a paragraph, right, that contains the main text. You have a hyperlink that is pointing to learn React. where does this content come from? It certainly doesn't come from the server, because the server responded with just an empty root, right? So what's happening here is that we are programmatically using JavaScript to inject and modify this DOM data structure, right? And any modifications you make to the DOM, they are immediately rendered on the user interface. So the way you draw stuff on the screen, right, in a user interface in web application is by manipulating this data structure, right? And that's what going to be the focus of the first half of this semester, how to manipulate this data structure, right, using React.js, right? First, we'll talk about HTML, then CSS, and then finally JavaScript, right? One way to manipulate it is to literally write, right, this HTML by hand, right, and manually type exactly what you want, okay? So for instance, I mean, we could literally make changes to the file here. It says, and say, you know, H1, you know, welcome to WebDev, right? We save that, and if we go here, no, there it is, welcome WebDev. So that's what the server's responding with the H1. See that? But then div is still empty, right? So but the DOM contains our new welcome, right? Plus our div is being injected with content with JavaScript. Where is that JavaScript? If you go back to our code, there is no JavaScript here. There is no JavaScript here. So the JavaScript is actually under the source, where we're going to be spending most of our time, right? Under the source directory is the JavaScript. So where is it? So it's in here, right here. The entry point are all these index files, right? This public, notice that the entry point was index.html, right? So this is the keyword index, you know, is very important in web development. It means that this is the default content that you would see, right, for that directory or for this code piece, right? So this is a default piece of content that you would see. So for instance, that's why here, if I don't ask for index, I would still see the same content because the server assumes that that's what you're asking for. That you know, if the URL doesn't contain specifically the file that you want, right, it assumes that you want the default piece of content in that folder, right? So that's why it returns the index.html. So same thing here, this in source, right? The entry point, right, to our JavaScript side of our application is the index.tsx, right? So a word on the extension, it says the .tsx, right? So there's a few things there. The S is script, right? T is for TypeScript. So TS is TypeScript. So TypeScript is a more modern version of JavaScript, right? One of the main criticisms of the JavaScript language is that it was not typed. Okay, that you didn't have to declare the variables or functions or data structures. You didn't have to specify the what the structure of the data and the variables and properties. You didn't have to specify any of that, and that made it very error prone to develop and test, right, and run, find errors during development time, right? And so Microsoft came up with a better version called TypeScript, which is a JavaScript version that is typed, right, where you can specify the data types of your variables, data structures. Okay? The other X in the name of the extension is that it's a mixture of JavaScript and XML, right? It's a mixture of two languages, TypeScript or JavaScript and XML, right? And they seamlessly integrate, right, to make one single language. So when you open it up, you'll notice, right, that you'll see a lot of kind of like C style languages, right? Like that with functions and imports, right? And function calls and data structures and variables and constants and things like that. But you'll also see things that look like this, right? Where you have something that looks like XML, right? And we have like a kind of like a seamless integration between what looks like JavaScript and what looks like XML, right? And the intent was that this is a language, right, that allows you to generate or compute HTML or XML like content, right, using the programmatic and functional aspects of a programming language, right? So let's read through this. This is what's pumping the content dynamically into that empty root. Right? So what is it doing? Well, first of all, it's grabbing that root element, right, by the ID. See that? So document is a reference. It's a global variable, right, that references the DOM, right, this data structure. This data structure over here, right, is referred to as the DOM, or document object model, right? It's a in-memory data structure that represents the understanding of what's supposed to be rendered on the screen, right? And we can manipulate it from JavaScript, right? And so document is a global variable that references the DOM, and it has an API that allows you to navigate through that data structure, looking for elements, deleting elements, adding elements to that data structure. And when you add or remove content from that data structure, you are effectively adding or removing from the user interface, right? What is being rendered on the screen. So first we are retrieving an element whose ID is root. And by golly, right, it's this one. We are grabbing that div from in memory. Now we have a reference to it. And then we're saying, hey, in that root, render the following. Render the following. Okay. So it's adding some strict mode, meaning that is adding some enforcement of certain rules of best practices, right? Especially in development, to catch some errors when you're developing, right? But we're not going to get into that. The main actual content of what actually is being rendered is this app, right? So notice that you have these pointy brackets, looks like XML, right? It's a self-closing tag, see that, right? And what this syntax does is that it's looking for a function, right? All these tags are mapped to functions, JavaScript functions that can run, execute. So we are invoking a function here that is being imported right here. It's a function that gets imported. And whatever this function returns, right, this whole thing gets replaced by whatever the function returns, right? So we can see, what gets computed by that function, and it's pumped to the content, right? So this is going to be whatever app returns is going to be rendered in the root element. So what does app return? So let's go into app, right? It's this one right here, this app.tsx, right? This app.tsx is indeed a function, and it's returning this content, right? It's returning this div, right? This header that contains an image, a paragraph, and a link. Ooh, where have we seen that? Right? It's right here. There it is. Here's the div with the header, right? With the image, with the paragraph, and the hyperlink. See that? That's content that is being returned by our app.tsx, right? Which gets now inserted dynamically into our root. Right? So this content is indeed, right, what gets rendered and injected into the root element. Make sense? Right. So basically, right, what React.js is just a function that you can write algorithms to compute what the user interface looks like, right? And we're going to be learning how is it that we're going to be creating our own algorithms, obviously not in a single function, multiple functions, right, that work together, right, to compute what the user interface should look like. The first couple of assignments, we're going to be building static content, right? So functions that return always the same thing, right? But as we start looking at JavaScript, we'll learn how to be able to click buttons or type in input fields, right? And be able to react to user commands, right? And add content, remove content, update content, right? As the user interacts with the user interface. Okay. All right. There's a question in the chat. Hi, President. Must have. Sure. Yes. If you need to leave, right? Again, this will be recorded and available a few minutes after the lecture is over, and you're welcome to take a look at that then. Please, don't binge watch these videos. Make sure that you stay on top of them and watch them as early as possible. I'm going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back. All right, don't go anywhere. Go. Let's take a bio break. I'm going to drink and stretch my legs, and I'll be right back. Okay. All right, and we're back. Okay, so we've shown how React.js is basically a function or set of functions that can compute what the user interface is going to look like. So let's start using it as the intended use. Okay. So this is a lot of the things that we just discussed are available here on the slides to follow along, right? We discussed the content of index.html, the div with the ID or root, right? And how the index.tsx is responsible for injecting the content that is generated by the app function, right? And it generates that content that you see on the screen. And we can edit the content, right, of the app.js to create our own content, right? So for instance, we might, this right now it's rendering some content that is statically in the index.html document, right? Plus some dynamic content that's being generated by the app function, right? So let's remove what's in the index.html. We're never going to touch this file, right? This was we're just going to remove that, and there it is. It's gone, right? And then we're going to do all our work in here, right? So we're just going to blow away this content, right? So it's gone. It's empty. So we're going to refresh. It's gone, right? And then we're going to do all our work in here. So you might say here, H1. I can't type today. Welcome to WebDev, right? And there it is. Welcome to WebDev. And it also it's using some styling CSS files that we're going to just throw away. We're going to use that. We're going to create our own styling. So I'm just going to remove this class, and we'll talk about classes next week when we discuss CSS, right? So there is some remove that styling. Plus, in the index.tsx, there's also some styling that's being used. I'm going to delete any of the default styling because we're going to take over the style, right? Remove that. And now we're back to the basic unadulterated HTML styling, right? That it's the browser's default styling, the default font, the default size of the font, right? The color and whatnot, okay? Which is pretty ugly, right? But it's going to give us a chance to practice next week, right? When we introduce CSS and how to make things look much prettier, right? So let's continue. Let's start talking about how is it that we create these functions, right? To compute the user interface, right? So first, we're going to be working with several exercises throughout this week, right? And we're going to put them all inside of lab components, right? Since this is the first week, right, we're going to be building the lab 1 component where we're going to put all the exercises for this week, right? So let's do that. So in the source directory, we're going to create a folder called labs, and in there we're going to have lab 1, lab 2, lab 3, right, for the various weeks of working those labs, right? So here in the source, we're going to create a folder called labs, right? And under there, we're going to have multiple folders. We're going to have lab 1, we're going to have lab 2, and so on and so forth, right? Lab 3, okay? And each one of them, we're going to create the default file or the default component, index that file, right? That is going to be what's going to actually be rendered, right? If you try to import something from that folder. So we're going to call it the index.tsx, right? And in here, we're going to create our first component, right? And components are just basically functions. So this is lab 1, and we're going to do an export, right, default, so that we can import that from other components, and we're just going to have like that, lab 1. Okay. So there it is. So it's a function that's exported, right, by the default function that is exported, right? You can have multiple functions in here. You can export all of them, but only one of them can be the default export. That means that it can be imported just by the name of the function, right? You don't have to do any extra work to import this this particular function, right? And so a component it could be just a function, or it could be a collection of multiple functions that can be combined into multiple into a bigger, more complex user interface, right? So for instance, you might have multiple contents for labs. So we have, here's lab 2, right? So let's change this to lab 2, right? And then let's do the same thing for this one. So we have, this is lab 3. So now we have 3 components, right? Lab 1 component, right? Lab 2 component, right? That's for next week, and lab 3 is for 2 weeks from now. So lab 3 here, and then in the root of the labs, right? We can have another index file that implements the labs, and the labs could be, the content would be the aggregation of all these other components into one single bigger component, right? So we can import all of these. So import lab 1, okay, and we can import lab 2, right? We'll do 3 in a minute, but let's create the lab component or labs component. So do export default function labs. Where we are, there it is, right? So we are creating a divider, right? That divider is a generic rectangular area, right? That is used to logically group together multiple elements, right? And it forces things to also render vertically, right? Adds vertical spacing, which we'll come back to that and see a lot of examples of that. And then here's our heading, right? That is of type 1, size 1. So it's a big, bold, black headings, right? And then here we have lab 1, lab 2, which is basically 2 functions, right? 2 functions that we are importing from these 2 files, these 2 directories, right? And what file is this actually? Is the file inside the index file in lab 1, right? So it's the default file, right? Because again, the name index. If it had a different name than index, you would have to explicitly name the file, right? But because here index is a default, I don't have to explicitly say index, right? I don't have to. It is implied. Right? So this lab 1, lab 2, each one is rendering its own content, and then you can have lab 3. You have lab 3. Notice that my IDE identifies the function and offers me to import it for me. So if I notice that it's not imported right now up there, but if I select it, notice that it does automatically import it for me. So the IDE is definitely helpful for that. So anyways, you notice that basically, right, you have these functions that are aggregate of other functions, not unlike other programming languages or other software development efforts, right, where you have an entry point for the application that then delegates work to other functions, and those functions delegate work to other functions, and so on and so forth, right? In this case, all these functions are aggregating, right, different content pieces, right, building a larger, ever more complex user interface. And finally, at the top level of the app, TSX, right, we can import the labs, right, in here. We can say bring in the labs. There it is, right? Notice that it imported for me, and so now my app is going to render the welcome and the labs. Right? We should see, there it is. Right? We have the welcome and then each one of the labs. All right. I think maybe the labs, since labs is H1, probably each one of these labs should be a little bit smaller, H2. So these are headings that are a little bit smaller. So you have 6 different sizes for headings. H2 is the second size. So these should all be a little smaller than the top level heading. There we go. So we have labs, and then these are a little bit smaller each. Make sense? Everybody good? Any questions? All right. Yeah. So let's continue. Let's take a look at what else we have here. So we have the labs. And then we grouped together each one of the labs, right, into one bigger labs, right, and then we brought that all the way up to the app top. Is the entry point of the application, which right now it's rendering just the labs. Okay. So yeah, so we've already used I've already introduced the web developer tools, and those are available here on the right hand side, that from any IDE, from any browser, right? You can right click and click on inspect, and then it brings up the inspector, right, or the WebDev tools here on the right hand side. We're going to be spending this week mostly here in this first tab that displays the DOM, right, the data structure that is being the data structure representation of what is being highlighted, what is being rendered here on the browser, kind of like the behind the scenes of how this page is built, right? It's kind of like the Neo seeing, what the matrix is really like, right? So this is reality, right? This is what Neo sees, and this is what everybody else sees, right? So we are the developers. We do care about the rendering and what's behind the scenes, right? We have to build that scene, right? That behind the scenes. Notice that as you hover over different DOM elements, it highlights what the corresponding visual rendering of that piece is on the screen, right? So headings. Notice that there's 2 types of headings. You have a size 1, right? It's pretty, it's the biggest heading. Heading 2 is a little smaller, but notice that the blue represents the content, right? Whereas the orange, or kind of like salmon color, is the margins, or what, the spacing in between the components, right? And div is just the rectangular area that logically breaks up the content vertically, right? And so we'll be talking about each one of these various elements in the lab 1 exercises. Also, you'll notice that on the right hand side, it contains the styling, right, of how the browser wants to render this. What colors, what margins, what justification left, right, what fonts, right, background color. So it says that H2, since it's highlighted, it says that its display is blocked. The font size is 1.5 EM, so 1.5 times the normal size, whereas H1 is 0.67, so it's a little bigger, right, than the normal size. So 0.6 of the normal size. I'm sorry, twice as big as the normal size. Okay, so lab 1 is H2, so it's 1.5 times bigger. Okay, EM means that it's relative. It's a relative size of what the normal size would be. Regular text, regular font would be size 1. Just think it's like 16 points, size 16. So 1.5, right? It's 16 plus, so it's 24, right? Points. So anyway, so we'll talk about this. On the right hand side is the CSS, how we tell, how we declare what each element should look like, what font, what colors, whatnot, and that'll be the topic of next week, right? So this week we're just talking about this side of the HTML. You should have this development tools open at all times, right? Because this gives you immediate feedback, right, of what is actually being rendered on the screen, right? And there might be something wrong. It might be that this is not rendering the way you expect it to be rendered. And then only by inspecting the DOM, you see where your errors are, right? Because you might have coded something wrong in the code, right? And so this browser is trying to interpret it in a particular way. It might not be exactly how we intended it to be interpreted, right? So we have to go back to the code to make sure that the DOM is rendering what we expect it to render. Okay, so let's continue. So we have the development tools. Okay, let's continue. All right, so we have those. We have the labs. Now, let's talk about what is it that you're going to be submitting, right? And so you're going to be working every week, right, in different assignments, assignment 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And you're going to be committing all this work to a GitHub repository, right? And each week you're going to be using a different branch, right? So for instance, this week we're going to be working on branch A1 for assignment 1, right? And then each week you're going to go to up 1, so assignment 2, A2, A3, A4, and so on and so forth, right? And you're going to be deploying each one of these branches to a separate URL, right? Online, right? And you're going to submit that so that the TAs can visit your content and give you a grade, right? So let me demonstrate how is it that you would go about that. So first of all, you'll need to have a Git installed on your machine. So if you're using a Mac, right, Git is already installed on your machine, right? If not, if you're on Windows, you can download various versions of a Git tool, right? And here's the standard Git implementation. So if you don't have it, go and download it and install it. Also make sure that you have a .git ignore that includes the node_modules in there, so that we're excluding that directory. We don't want to push that into a Git repository. And then we have to create an online placeholder for our project. So let's do that. So let me go to Git over here. So we'll go GitHub, and we are going to look at my repositories. I'm going to say new repository. And so I'm going to use the name. So I'm going to stop this for a second. I'm going to use the same name that I used here for the repository. Let me bring this over here. So I'll paste that in there. And it'll be public. So I'll create that. There we go. So it's created, but there's nothing in it, right? So we're going to commit what we have so far, and we're going to push it over to the to Netlify, right? So that we have something running remotely, right? So that we can submit it for the TAs, right? So let's do that. So let's head over here, and we are in the directory of our project. We have git ignore. Let's make sure that it contains the node underscore modules. Perfect, right? And let's see, what branch are we in? So we're in the main branch, which is fine. So I'm going to switch over to the A1 branch. So git checkout -b. So A1. So this creates a new branch. I'm in the A1 branch right now. I can see that the files that I've worked so far look with the status. We modified the app.tx, we modified the index, that's correct. We created a labs directory, right, with a whole bunch of content in there. So I'm going to add everything. I'm going to say git add everything. So I'm going to git status. So those are all the files I'm checking. Yep, correct. Those are all the files I've created. And you verify, make sure that this is what you have created. And now we have to make this available on Git. Right, so let's go back to Git over here. So we've already done this. So Git is already there. We've added everything. We need to commit. Right, so let's commit. So I'm going to commit, git commit, my first commit. Okay, this is being committed. I already have a branch, so I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to add this repository, this remote repository. I'm going to add it as my my remote, right? And I'm going to make it the origin, meaning this is going to be my default remote. So when I push my changes as I net commit, as I go forward, right, when I push, it'll assume that this is where we want to push it to, right? So I'm going to add this as a remote, okay, and then I should be able to push. But I'm going to push to not main. I'm going to push orange to A2, A1, sorry. Right, I'm going to push that. So when we go here and now we refresh, we should be able to see all the code that we had created earlier. And there it is. See that? We have the source, we have the public, we have the git ignore. Right? If we go to public, we'll see that we have the index HTML document, which we're not touching. Right? And then under source, we can see that we have the app.tsx, right, which right, loads our labs. We can see our labs with lab 1, lab 2, lab 3. Each one is there. Perfect, right? We have an index with each one of the labs. Yes? All right, perfect. So now it's on Git. So that's the first step. We make it available on Git. And now we can deploy this code, right, into a remote server so that just like we are hosting this locally on our machine, we want to be able to host this content also remotely, right? So that we can send the URL to anyone, right? And they can see the work that we've done so far, in particular the TAs. Because this is running locally, right? There's no way that I can share this with the TAs or myself or anyone, right? Because this is only running on my machine. If I turn off my machine, nobody's going to be able to see this, right? So ideally, you deploy this on a remote server that's available 24/7, and folks can come and take a look at it, right? You can share with folks, right? All right. So to do that, what we're going to do is once we've pushed, right, and deploy and our content is available on our remote server, right? We need to publish this to Netlify, right? And so to publish this content into a remote server or service like Netlify, first we'll need to create an account, right? So if you don't have an account on Netlify, go and create an account. You can use GitHub as your login information, or your Gmail as your account. I'm using GitHub, right? And we're going to tie it to GitHub, right? So that we're going to tell it, hey, my source code is on GitHub. Go fetch it. Clone it down with Git, right? Compile everything, deploy it, right, and make it available at a particular online URL, right? So I can hand it over to my TA or my prospective employer, or I want to share it with and show folks all the great things that I'm working on, right? So anyway, so let me illustrate that. So So here, let's go to Netlify. So I already have an account on Netlify. So I'm going to go Netlify. Now let me log in with my GitHub. And I can create a new site, import an existing site from an existing project. And it was something that is deployed to GitHub, right? It's authorizing and logging into GitHub, which already had asked me to do that. You might need to do it yourself from scratch. Oh, there's a question in the chat. Let's see. Could you please explain why we created a separate branch before pushing? Right. So, so the reason for the branches is that this is going to give you an opportunity to be able to keep working on the assignments, right? Without worrying that if the previous assignment is already graded, right? So that you can start working with assignment 2, right, in a separate branch, deployed to a separate URL, right? So that TAs can grade you right behind you, right? They're grading assignment 1 while you're starting to work on assignment 2, right? So that any changes that you make to branch A2 are not going to disrupt, any work that you've done prior to assignment 1, right? So you can keep working forward, as we grade, right behind you. So that's the intent of having separate branches. Also, it's also a good practice, whenever you're working on something new, whether it's a new feature or it's a bug fix or something like that, it's common that you create a new branch, do all your work there, right? And when you're done, you're happy with that, right? You merge it back into the main branch, right? You don't need to merge it back to the main branch. It is a good practice, although we're not going to require that. Although I strongly suggest that you do. We're just going to care only about branches A1, A2, A3 going forward. So yeah, so this is looking for all the branches that I have so far. I'm going to look at the project I just created, and the name is this. So I'm just going to copy that so you can search for that. That repo, enter. It's going to look for that. Hopefully we'll find it. There it is. It found it. So we can go in there and says, okay, so it's asking me what branch to deploy. And yeah, branch A1, team, site name, the default URL for your site. If none, it provided a random site name. So let's see, will it check availability? Let's see. Oh, okay, it'll do that. Great. Site name is available. Let's see, specify your Netlify build base directory, npm build is going to build this. Run build, Netlify functions, deploy. Okay, so we're going to deploy that. So this is going to log into my Git. It's going to clone it down. We can see it here. We're going to take a look at the progress of Netlify, cloning down my repository, running the build, and then deploying it to the server, and then making it available for us. So let's see. So while that's going, oh, there it is. Yeah, so there it is. Notice it's doing the git clone. See that? It's cloning the git repository I gave it. Right, at some point it's going to run npm build. Bum, 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 bum. I need some elevator music here. Yeah, it's determining what versions of it. Oh, deploy. Oh, why did it fail? Let's see. Building failed. Why did it fail? Fail CI. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's so this it has a feature looking for minor issues that that would cause that you should look at the quality of the source code, and it's complaining a few things such as the logo is defined but is never used. For instance, here probably on app.tsx, yeah, we are defining logo, but we're never using it. Okay, that's a minor thing, and it should not have failed the build. So we should turn off some of those minor issues by which it would stop the build. So let's fix that. We can configure. Let's see, do I have that here? No, I don't have that. It's probably in the assignment. Okay, there it is. So in the command that builds, right, we're going to add continuous integration false, meaning we're going to turn off these features of continuous integration. That is going to validate some of the minor things. Obviously, if it doesn't compile, definitely we want to fail that, but these are not compile errors, right? So we're going to turn that feature off. Where is it? So let me just copy that. So if we go back to the deployment, we can go see at the deployment settings and continuous deployment. Here we will see in the build settings, right? Notice that the command is here npm build. So we're going to configure that, and we're going to paste in front of this CI equal false, and then the npm run build, right? So we're going to save that. Let's see that. Plus, now that I'm here anyway, we can, let's see, branches, here we go. So branches and deploy context. So right now it's deploying only branch A1, but actually we want to deploy all our branches, right? Because we're gonna have several branches. Typically you only have one branch that you deploy, the main branch, right? But we wanna have different versions of the application as you are working through the various assignments, right? And you want to have the A1 branch deployed so that the TAs can grade it. And then also A2 branch, so that because you're working on it. And while A1 is still deployed, right? So that the TAs can keep looking at your A1 work, right? Assignment 1 work while you're still working on assignment 2. So they're both going to be deployed simultaneously, right? So we can do that. We can ask it to deploy all the branches, right? So deploy only A1, no, we're going to configure that. I'm going to say deploy all the branches. No, let me, any pull requests against the production branch. Okay, yeah, let's save that, perfect. Right now it's just A1, right? But as we go forward, it'll have all the branches deployed. Okay, all right, so that one failed, so we can go back to the deploys, and this was the one that failed, and we can run it again and say trigger deploy, clear cache and deploy site. Yep, just run it brand new. Oh, no, we didn't make the change. Oh yeah, no, I removed the logo, but we never pushed that, right? That's fine. We'll get a chance to push new content in a minute. Okay, so that's going through the same process again. It's going to clone it again, run the build. Another way to trigger a deploy is certainly manually, right? You can go in there and trigger the deploy, but also it's configured so that if you push any new changes, it will automatically kick off a deployment, right? So you can always see the latest deployed on Netlify. There it is. So it's done successfully. We can open the production, which is this website. So we go there. There it is. So Canvas, a React web app, right? Netlify. Notice that it has the A1 -- in front of it. See that? That means that this is the content, right? That is in branch A1, right? And so next time when you deploy branch A2, right, it will have A2 -- right? And then Canvas, blah, 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 right? Obviously for you, this name is already taken. So you won't be able to use this name. It'll check to see, right? Unless you give it a, something that is peculiar to you. Maybe you can use your, your name or something that makes your URL unique. But nevertheless, and notice that this content is identical to the content that we were running locally, right, on localhost, right? So if I go to localhost 3000, oh, it's not running. Let's run it on the server. Let's do npm start. And if I go back here, there it is, right? So this content, right, it's I'm zoomed in here. Right, notice that this content, the local content, is identical to what's deployed now in the remote server. But this is only visible in my computer, whereas this is visible to the entire world. I can copy this URL, right, and send it to anyone, right, and they can see my content. That's the whole point, right? You're going to submit this URL to so that the TAs can come and visit your website so that they can grade it. Yes? Any questions? Make sense? All right. Yeah, so let's start practicing HTML. I mean, we've been talking about some of the simpler things like headings and divs, right? But let's go through some of the more common elements, right? That we're going to probably just go through maybe the top 20% of the HTML elements, of which you're going to be using 80% of the time, right? So let's go through some of the more common ones. React app. Okay, we did this. Okay, we went through that, right? Yeah, we went through the deployment. And deploy to identify branches, we did that, right? Okay, yeah, deploy settings, we set all. Okay, yeah, we did that already. Okay, good. All right, so let's take a look at some of the HTML. All right, so let's open this in a window. All right, so HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, right? So it's a language that allows you to configure the look and feel, the structure of an HTML document, right? It allows you to say, break up this content vertically, right? Render this as a heading, as a paragraph, as a list, as a table with a whole bunch of columns and a whole bunch of rows, right? Bring in that image and display it over here, right? So let's learn some of the more basic things, right? So typically HTML documents are written in plain HTML, right? We've seen an example of that in the index.html document, right? And really that's the only case where we're ever going to see just a plain text HTML document, right? We're going to spend most of our time writing HTML within functions, right? That their return value is HTML snippets, pieces of HTML, right? That they are meant to be aggregated, imported, right? So that we can calculate, more and more complex functions, more complex, HTML snippets, right? So you can create documents by plain, ASCII files, right? Like hello.html, right? And put content in there, and that a browser would be able to render that. But we're going to be focusing on something more interesting, where we're going to be generating this, from within functions, right? JavaScript functions. So here's the basic structure of an HTML document. You have typically you have a doc type at the top, right? That tells the browser how to interpret the syntax of the document, right? There's a question in the chat. I'm not sure whether I took that point. Since we use Netlify, TAs can grade based on URL links, so we don't have to use Curry GitHub account. No, please do not use the Curry GitHub accounts. Use your own GitHub. So create a GitHub account, github.com, as opposed to the college's GitHub. There are some limitations with the university's GitHub or college's GitHub. So please create your own. And it's okay if they are public repositories, and just share the not the GitHub repository, but the URL to the. Actually, no, I need both. I need you to provide the URL to the deployed site on Netlify, plus the GitHub URL. And the branches is so that you can keep working on multiple assignments, right, ahead of the assignments that are being graded previously, right, from that you've worked before. So you don't want to trample on previous assignments as you're working forward on the next assignment. So that's the intent. So we have the root. So HTML is a derivative, or it's a particular dialect, right, of XML, right? XML, extensible markup language, right? And so this version of XML, which is HTML, it has a specific use to be parsed by a browser, and the browser parses the XML in an HTML document, and it knows to create the DOM, right? Creating the DOM data structure, right? That has the root HTML, then it has a head and a body. The head is for meta information, such as who the author is, any dependencies and whatnot, whereas the main content is in the body, right? Now, we're going to be using different terms to refer to these tags, right? So when we're looking at HTML source code, we usually use the term tag, and we'll say that there's the body is the opening tag, and the slash body, that's the closing tag, right? But usually when we discuss the same body but rendered in the browser as a DOM, right? So for instance, right, if we are looking at inspecting this, right, and we're looking at it here, right, we usually, since this is a hierarchical data structure, we'll often use a more generic term instead of tag. We'll use like element, right, or we'll use node, right? Just to highlight the fact that this is part of some larger data structure, right, or some node in a larger hierarchical data structure, right? But the difference is so subtle, right, that it will typically use the terminology indistinguishable, or we use one when we mean the other, right, and they could use it interchangeably. Okay. So let's continue. You can also specify style sheets. How is it that this document is going to be rendered, what fonts, what colors and backgrounds and whatnot. Right, and the head contains some meta information. Also, white spaces are ignored by HTML, by the browsers, right? So if you don't put any tags that format the content, right, the browser is going to interpret that as just one long run a sentence, right? That one long text block. Right, so it's going to ignore these extra new lines over here, or if you have any extra tabs or any extra spaces, they are all ignored. Just render like one single thing, right? The DOM, again, I mentioned earlier, it's a data structure that the browsers create when they parse an HTML document, right? And you can access that through the inspector, right? And it creates a set of nodes, right, and elements, right, that point to each other. That the browser parses, right? It navigates from the root, right? It goes through each one element rendering on the screen. Okay. And so the first couple of simple tags or elements, right, are headings and paragraphs. So headings, we've seen already some examples of that, right? H1, H2, right, all the way to H6. Those are different sizes of headings that you want to use to break up a document into multiple sections and subsections, right? And you basically just wrap the texts, right? And you put H1, H2, and slash H1. So the opening H1 and the closing H1, right? Makes it in large, bold, black letters. We say that this is the opening tag and this is the closing tag, and the in between the two tags, we call that the body of the tag, right? So here's an example that we can work on, right? We can copy that in the lab one. We can paste that into our lab one. So lab one, and we can paste it in there. And then we can see how it's rendered. Where do we have it rendered? Here, I think. There it is, right? There's our heading, and there's the text that we just added. Then there's paragraphs. Also, again, if you don't have any space, any formatting, right? The browser just ignores any extra spaces. If you want to maintain the vertical spacing and distinguish different paragraphs, right? You would wrap the text with opening P and closing P, which would force the separation and the vertical spacing in between, right? So here's an example. Let's grab that and let's paste that under here, right? And so that where is that rendered? Oh, here. Oh, here's the code. Sorry. Put that here. There we go. So yes, there's our paragraph, right? And let's add a couple more paragraphs. So for instance, if you just have text like that unformatted, right, in the code, let's say over here, right, you paste this. So there it is. So you have these separate paragraphs. Notice that even my IDE is going to ignore it, right? When I save it, it's going to say, oh, you have all these extra spaces. I'm just going to ignore that. It knows that the browser is going to ignore it, right? So so that when it gets rendered, notice that even though they were meant to be separate paragraphs, they all render like jumble all together. So if you do want the spacing, you have to explicitly add, right, the opening paragraph, right, and closing. So opening paragraph and then the closing paragraph, and then opening paragraph and then the closing paragraph, like that. Now you save that, and when you go here now, you see that these paragraphs are now distinct from one another. Okay. Yeah, we added the paragraphs. Okay. All right, let's see one more. The list. So lists are also useful for rendering content as a collection of elements that are associated with one another, right? That you want to display multiple elements, right, one after another, either an ordered list or an unordered list, like with bullets, right? So to render unordered lists like bullets, you use the UL tags, right? And then inside you can have any number of line items, right, where each item is distinguished by a bullet, right? So unordered lists are useful, if you're rendering things that you don't care to render any particular order, or if you want to be able to display and that things that are in a specific order, you use ordered lists, right? And then the line items 1, 2, 3, right? And so here's an example of ordered lists, right? By things that you want to follow in a particular set of steps, right? You want to learn HTML, JavaScript, build cool stuff, right? And unordered lists, right? That if you don't care about with the order, you want to do that. So here's an example of that. So let's copy this. into the source code. Where's our source code? Here's our code. So I'm going to paste it below this like that. So notice that here, even though I added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Again, it knows, the IDE knows that the browser is going to ignore those extra spaces, right? So it's going to render all jumbled up. So if I refresh, there they are. So creating the pancakes in that particular order is ignoring the extra formatting that I've added of new lines and tabs. If I do want the actual formatting, right, I would have to wrap this in a. Actually, I want this to be in that particular order. Right, so we say OL, and then here instead of this line item, that's one, I can wrap this into line items like that, right? And so let's do that for all these. I'm just going to paste this here like that. Right, and just going to paste these guys at the end. Oops. There we go. Now save it. Now it knows that it's going to render it correctly. So there it is. Notice that it adds the numbers itself, the browser, as it parses the ordered list. Okay. So same thing with unordered lists, right? So here's an example of an unordered list of books that I like, right, in no specific order. So it's added at the bottom. So and these render as I like these books in no particular order. Okay. Now tables are also very useful for rendering things in a tabular format, right? One of the original intents of Tim Berners-Lee when he came up with the World Wide Web was, he wanted to share, research data, right, with his colleagues, right? And oftentimes this data is represented in tabular format, right? And so you can use the table tags, right, to render tabular data. And the table tag has several subtags in there to render the headings of the table, right? These are typically the various fields, right, or different properties that you want to measure, right? And then in the body contain the actual data, right, that you've recorded, right, where each row in the table constitutes a data point, right, that a measurement, and then the values go in a particular column of what property has been measured, right, for that particular record, right? And then you can have an optional footer at the bottom, right, which is not shown here, right, that can be used maybe to compute totals or averages or maxima, minimum, right, median, things like that, where our aggregate values, right? So here's an example of using a table to create a heading of various fields that you're going to measure for various usernames or users that are in a database, perhaps, right, that have fields such as username, password, first name, last name, their role, right, and renders like this. And then in the body, right, you can have various records that represent each one of the individuals in that in that particular database, right? And so here's an example of that you might use to capture the various quizzes that you might be taking over the course of this semester, right? And here's I copied some comments. Let me remove some of these. Right, and so this renders as these tables down here, and you can have any number of quizzes. So you might have one quiz and one quiz per row. So this might be quiz 2, and the quiz is about CSS, and you might have quiz 3, right, and this is going to be about JavaScript. I'm not bothering to change the the time and date, and there it is. We have quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, and then you have maybe the average of the grades. Okay, and that's not the average, right? So I think the average should be an 85 or 85. I can't write today. There we go. Make sense? So anyway, so a lot of the exercises that we're going over here together today are included in the assignment, right? That is, it's going out today, right? We've gone through some of the first couple of exercises together, right? And the assignments are organized in having two main sections, right? As the lab section, right, walks you through several exercises like the ones we've done here together, right? So for instance, creating the React application, using the npx commands, right? Running it, creating the labs component, the lab1 component, right? Importing it into the root app.tsx. So basically everything we've done so far today, right? And then, commenting out the CSS, also making sure that it renders like as expected, right? So please, follow the instructions and complete all the exercises, right? Introduce you to the WebDev tools, and then the various elements and tags, such as the heading tag, the paragraph tag, right? Apply. And then the lists, the tables. So go through each one of the exercises. Now, once you've had a chance to practice, all these exercises and gain some basic skills in HTML, you're going to be asked to implement. You're going to be asked to implement, using all those skills. You're going to implement a Canvas, right? And so Canvas is an application, an online learning management system that you should be very familiar with, right? It's based on Canvas. Where's Canvas? Where did I put it? There we go, Canvas. This is Canvas, right? So we're going to be building Canvas, right? So Canvas is based on this popular learning management system, and we're going to be learning about how to build the dashboard, right? We have a list of all the courses that you're enrolled in or you're teaching. We're going to learn about being able to navigate to a particular course, right? And within that course, be able to take a look at the various modules, right? And how to create content inside of these modules, and be able to implement assignments, right? Where you can edit an assignment, navigate to an assignment and then edit it. Be able to set the points, description, percentages, submission, due dates, and things like that. So we're going to be building a version of Canvas. Obviously, not the entire thing. It's going to be a prototype, right? But I'm going to give you the feeling of how is it that you would build something like this, right? And even though we're not going to build the whole thing, my hope is that by the end of this course, you would feel confident enough, right, that you could go off and implement something like this, right? And add even new features that Canvas doesn't have that you wish it had, right? And one of the options of what you might do as a project, right, is to implement the quizzes, right? So we don't implement this as an assignment, but this would be an option for you, right, where you can list the quizzes, create new quizzes, right, and then you can edit the quiz where you can change the grades, the descriptions, when is it available, look at the questions, add new questions, edit questions, right, change different versions of the type of question that it is. So that's one of the options that you have for a final project, which is basically extending right, the assignments that you've been working throughout the semester, right? So add a feature. One of the features that I'm proposing, right, is that you add quizzes. Okay. So yeah, so we've worked some more on for in our labs. Let's commit this to our repo, right, and then push and make sure that our changes have been committed, right, have been deployed to Netlify.